Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Rseat is actually a copy of one we had maybe 6 months ago, and this time the anti-meta car is the former meta car. Let's get into it. The last time we had this combo, the Alpha 155 was the meta car, but since the Lancer is so powerful now, it has become the anti-meta car. Extremely similar to the Lancer, even in dimensions and looks, it's simply not quite as good, but at least it sounds better. I managed to put it in 57th place globally, which puts me in the 2nd place for all of the non-Lancers and of course for the 155, since it's the only thing that can even come close. But if you look at the leaderboard, it's really ridiculous how dominant the Lancer is. I believe there are only 5 cars that are not the Lancer, and they're all the 155. Here's the tune I put together for the car. There's not a lot that you can actually do, but this does end up working. It does feel better than stock, and it works for race pace as well as time trial. Don't forget to put it on before every single race. As you go into the first braking zone, make sure you do not dip your tires into the grass. 1 post before the end of the cyclone fence on the right is when you're going to hit the brakes. Brake straight until you get under the hanging black sign above and then start turning in. Notice how heavily I'm staying on the brakes as I start trail braking in. We're not going to really lift off until we're about to go over the curb. That's when you're going to add a lot more steering and then get back on the throttle. Make sure you're squeezing in as much full throttle as you possibly can. When we get all the way past this white line right here, then we're going to hit the brakes. Full brake for a brief moment before we start turning in, trail braking for just a second, and then we're going to come completely off the brakes, as you can see here, no throttle either, and you want to feel the car rotate right here. When the car starts rotating, then you can continue steering, get back on that throttle gently of course, and try to continue steering so you stay away from this grass. If the car doesn't rotate before you get on the throttle, you're going to understeer into that grass. Luckily, this little tire mark in the middle of the road right here is consistent each session, so you can use that as a turn-in point, but when it comes to the actual race, you're going to have to just use your instincts. As you turn in, stay full throttle until you get really close to the apex, then you're going to start lifting off just enough to tuck your nose really close to that sausage curb. You do not want to go over that sausage curb. Back on the throttle as soon as you can, and as you can see from the Ghost, if you carry too much speed there and you get on the throttle too late, then you're going to lose a lot of time at the end of this straightish section. Making sure you use all of the curbing on that right-hander, we're going to stay far to the left, look for the 100 meter board that's hanging above, and at the chevron directly after that, you're going to hit the brakes hard. Brake in a straight line, don't start turning until right before the end of the curb on the left. You're going to gently add more and more steering as you slow down more and more, and as you cross this white line, we want to come entirely off the brakes, add more steering, and then get back on that throttle gently to make sure we don't get any understeer or oversteer. The key here is to slow down enough that you can turn and add a lot of throttle really early so you're actually on the throttle before you hit the apex. It's not a long lap, but it's pretty hard. Good luck. It's really easy to go in the grass here, so make sure you definitely avoid that. You can go over more of this curb, cutting it really tightly, but you're going to bounce, and so it's kind of hard to control where the bounce goes. You can actually take more of that inside curb on the right-hander as well, and when it comes to this corner, a lot of people hit that orange sausage curb. That's going to completely ruin your lap. I don't think I've ever seen anyone hit that and had a successful lap, so err on the side of caution when it comes to that one. Turn early enough for that final right-hander, or else your car is going to understeer and it's going to slow you down. And like I said before, you want to slow down as much as you possibly can, get off the brakes entirely, and then get on that throttle as early as you can. It's a fine balance between getting on the throttle too early and losing too much speed going into that final corner, but in general, you do just want to be on that throttle as early as you can. By now, if you've been watching my series at all, you're probably very used to the exact strategy that you need to use for this race. Tire wear is virtually non-existent, fuel usage virtually non-existent, so the only thing you can do is use the one required pit stop to try to figure out some kind of sneaky strategy, and of course, we're going to do the exact same thing we always do. The ultimate goal is to go in the pits when no one in front of you or behind you will be going in the pits as well. While you can't control who's going to go in the pits and follow you, you can definitely avoid going in the pits if the people directly in front of you are going into the pits. Since everyone has to go to the pits, they're going to lose the exact same amount of time. If other people end up battling while you're in the pits and you don't have anyone to battle, then of course you're going to have the advantage there. For instance, if you are 2 seconds behind someone, but you go half a second faster than them for only 4 laps, and then they come out of the pits, you're going to end up right next to them. The number one thing that can cause people to slow down is traffic. Battling people, passing people, that's going to take time. So if you can avoid all of that, you can just pass the people during the pit stop. If you have a buddy, you could potentially bump draft on the straights and end up going a little bit faster, but in general, especially with this short track, that's not going to work out very well. Now, I had a few people talk about the fact that the 155 is so incredibly powerful that it's almost a meta car, but not quite, and I just chose it because compared to the Lancer, it is definitely not as powerful, not as good. But with that said, pretty much every one of the all-wheel drive cars can work, save for maybe the Veyron. Well, it can work, it's just not going to be very competitive, but everything's pretty close. So, if you're only maybe a tenth or two down compared to the 155 or the Lancer, then if you use this strategy, you could end up on top. Like always, if you cross the pit line on entry or exit, then you're going to get a 3-second penalty, but luckily it's super short, so you can make a last-minute decision to go in the pits if you decide that people in front of you aren't, or if you just want to follow someone in. Even if you're not actively battling people, Dirty Air can really slow you down, so I thought it was hilarious that the first person we encountered was our buddy Dirty Air. It's important in these races, actually it's important in every race, to make sure that you're not battling unnecessarily, and only to go for moves if you're absolutely certain that you can make it, or at least if you really think you can make it. This also goes for defending. Like always, everyone has a right to defend, however, it's really not a great idea to defend against someone who catches you really easily, and or has a really good pace comparative to you. That doesn't mean you should just roll over, but if you try to defend and it's looking like you have to slow both of you down quite a lot, it's better not to do it. Now, I'm not talking about Dirty Air right here. Dirty Air was just giving me a good clean race. He only defended once, and we're just racing side by side, so this isn't at all talking about our friend Dirty Air. In fact, he lifted there to make sure that it didn't cause any more issues, and that actually gave him a better opportunity to then follow me, so he was actually playing it really smart. But in general, if you have to defend and you're losing multiple tenths per lap, you do not want to do that. If you've ever watched my stream, you'll notice we talk about it quite frequently. There are a lot of people who defend no matter what, even if they're racing someone who's very much obviously faster than them. Now, some people just want to race for the sake of racing. They don't care where their finishing position is. But if you do care where your finishing position is, if you'd rather have 6th than 7th, then it's a much better idea not to defend super hard, because it's very easy to go from 6th to 9th if you're defending way too hard against someone who's faster than you, because you're going to let everyone behind catch up to you, and you're just going to lose multiple positions rather than just that one. Speaking of over-defending, I initially did not want to include this race in my guide, and I almost didn't. I felt bad that I missed the apex there, but he also gave me a lot of space and everything was fine. However, the next thing that happened was not fine. I actually braked early. I wasn't trying to dive, I wasn't actually even going for a pass. I did want to make sure that he felt pressured, but he braked even earlier than I did, and then turned in way before the corner. If you move under braking, there's absolutely nothing that the person behind you can do to avoid it. I'm going to go back and show you a little bit more. Going into a corner, sometimes I like to position myself as if I were going for a pass without actually going for a pass. And as you can see, I'm on the brakes about 10 feet earlier than I usually am, but he's also on the brakes, and he's going slower. Braking here will allow me to stick to the apex easily, but as you can see, he's already turning across my line, and in fact, as soon as this unpauses, you're going to see he turns in even more. You can also tell by how far away we are from the apex that he's turning in way before the actual apex. So essentially, he's just trying to block me with this car. People do this all the time in Gran Turismo, and then they have the audacity to blame the other person. If you're not really educated on this, it might look like I'm just driving straight through him, but you'll also notice that I was fully on the brakes, and when I've committed to the brakes, there's not a lot more that I can do to slow down. I can't drag my feet through the cement, I don't have parachutes, so he is choosing to make contact, and luckily, he didn't drive me dirty after that. But you see these situations, there's absolutely nothing I could have done, and I would not have hit him if he didn't brake early and turn across my line. Don't turn in braking zones. To further expand upon that, a lot of people do that on accident. The unfortunate thing about that is when people do that on accident, they're generally the type of person who doesn't realize that what they're doing is not okay and would cause a collision in real life. Obviously it causes a collision in this, but that would have ended both of our races if he did that in real life. If you've been in a situation like this, it's really important to ask yourself if you moved across the person's line, because again, I can't reiterate how much I cannot do anything after I've committed to the brakes, and on top of that, I would have very easily made the corner had he not done that. On the other side of that are the dark arts of Gran Turismo and sim racing in general. A lot of people do stuff like that that can kind of make it seem like it wasn't their fault, so that they can blame the other person and then just try to get away with something sneaky. If they can gain the favor of people who are watching or other people in the lobby, then it might cause other people to drive that person dirty in turn. It's happened to me many times. I've had lots of people drive me dirty and then tell the lobby that I was driving dirty, so then when I approach and try to make a clean pass, they're just not going to let it happen. It's wild, but it happens all the time in Gran Turismo and other sim racing titles. I will now step off my soapbox after I mention this one little thing. The reason that I mention it so much right now is because in the past, had that happened to me, I actually wouldn't even use this replay and I'd go back and try to film another one. And that just is way too time consuming, so I'm hoping you guys understand my point of view, and if you disagree, I'm open to comments and discussion about it. But as you can see, I can very cleanly pass people as long as they do the right thing. I was just in 7th place on lap 12. In lap 17, we had one more person come out of the pits, but they're in front of us. That's our friend Dr. Marco. Another person was going to the pits just as I was negotiating the final corner, which meant that I was easily going to get all the way in front of them. Our friend Hellsfire was actually doing a completely different strategy than I was, and he was doing really well, so he was going to come out of the pits in front of us. Dilly Dilly, however, didn't go in the pits until I was negotiating the final corner once again, so we easily got in front of him as well. We started this race in last place, in 16th place, but thanks to that strategy, we are now knocking on the door of a podium. In this situation, since the Lancer's better in general and he has the slipstream from Hellsfire in front, there wasn't a lot I could do. All I could do was stick close to him, try to get a better exit on that last straight, and of course, I was going to try to go for a pass as long as I wasn't too far behind. It's not bad to go for a lunge. Lunges are okay, you see it all the time, and if you make it obvious that it's going to happen, then people can avoid it. I've raced Dr. Marco a lot, so I knew that he knew I was going to pass on the inside if I went for it, and I also knew that he would defend by trying to take a wider line and carry more speed through. By taking that wider line, he could have potentially actually carried more speed and had a better exit than I would, but it didn't happen this time, and I was luckily able to pull off a podium from 16th place thanks to that awesome strategy. Thank you again for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, a big shout out to all of my members. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate every single one of you.